Help us reach 1,000 subscribers on our new channel Lesbian Stories. We hope you enjoy the story. I never thought my career-threatening injury would lead me to love. That Tuesday morning in Oakland, my shoulder screamed in protest as I served another tennis ball into the net. The morning sun beat down mercilessly on the practice court, and my coach Mike's concerned expression said it all. "Emma, we need to get that shoulder checked out. The Open's in 3 weeks." I knew he was right. At 29, I couldn't afford another setback. The sports clinic Mike recommended was one of those modern glass and steel buildings that screamed expensive. The receptionist handed me a stack of paperwork, and that's when I first heard her voice. "Emma Harrison? I'm Cassandra Mitchell, but please call me Cass." I looked up to see a tall brunette with striking green eyes and a warm smile that made my stomach do an unexpected flip. Her white lab coat was rolled up at the sleeves, revealing toned forearms. Something about her presence made me forget about my shoulder pain momentarily. The assessment room was warm and dimly lit, with essential oils diffusing in the corner. As Cass's fingers worked their way across my shoulder, I found myself hyper-aware of every touch. Her movements were precise, professional, but there was something else, a gentleness that seemed personal. "Your rotator cuff is inflamed," she explained, her breath tickling my ear. "But what interests me more is this old injury pattern. How long have you been compensating?" "Since the French Open last year," I admitted, surprised she'd noticed. Most therapists hadn't. "That's your tell," she smiled, stepping back. "You're right-handed, but you've been shifting your weight left. It's subtle, but it's there." Throughout the session, we talked about everything from tennis to travel. Her knowledge of sports biomechanics was impressive, but it was the way she listened, really listened, that caught me off guard. For the first time in years, I felt seen beyond my ATP ranking. "You'll need at least 6 sessions," she said as I was leaving. "Probably more, given your tournament schedule." "Same time next week?" I found myself asking, perhaps too eagerly. "Perfect," she replied, and there was that smile again. Walking to my car, I couldn't shake the strange flutter in my chest. I dated men throughout my career, mostly fellow athletes who understood the lifestyle. But this feeling? This was different. Dangerous, even. I tried to convince myself it was just gratitude for finding a skilled therapist. That night, I couldn't sleep. I kept replaying every moment, every casual touch, every shared laugh. When my phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number, my heart raced. "Ice that shoulder tonight. And don't even think about practicing that serve tomorrow. Doctor's orders. Cass." I stared at the message far too long, grinning like a teenager. What was happening to me? I was straight, always had been. Yet here I was, already counting the days until my next appointment, already craving the feeling of her hands on my skin. Little did I know, this was just the beginning of a journey that would challenge everything I thought I knew about myself, about love, and about the price we pay for being true to our hearts. 3 weeks into my therapy sessions with Cass, and my shoulder wasn't the only thing experiencing profound changes. Each visit became a delicate dance of professional boundaries and something else, something electric that hung in the air between us. "Your range of motion is improving," Cass noted during one session, her fingers tracing circles on my shoulder blade. "But you're still carrying tension here." The way she touched me was different from other therapists, more intuitive, like she could read my body's story. I'd started scheduling my appointments for the end of the day, when the clinic was quieter. Sometimes our sessions would run over, neither of us seeming to notice the time slipping away. We'd talk about everything. My fears about aging out of professional tennis, her passion for helping athletes recover, our shared love of obscure indie films. "You know," she said one evening, as I was reluctantly getting ready to leave, "there's this little Italian place around the corner. They make the best tiramisu in Oakland." My heart skipped. "Are you asking me to dinner, Dr. Mitchell?" "Purely professional." She smiled, but her eyes said something different. "We should discuss your treatment plan in detail." The restaurant was intimate, all candlelight and red checkered tablecloths. We sat in a corner booth, and somehow the conversation flowed even more freely without the pretense of therapy. Cass told me about growing up in Seattle, her journey through medical school, her decision to specialize in sports therapy. "What about relationships?" I found myself asking, then immediately regretted my boldness. She paused, swirling her wine. "My last one ended badly. She wasn't who I thought she was." She. The word hung between us like a revelation. I felt my cheeks flush, not from the wine. I've never. I started, then stopped. I mean, I've only dated men. And now? Her green eyes held mine across the table. Now I'm not sure of anything, I admitted. The honesty felt both terrifying and liberating. We ended up walking for hours after dinner, our shoulders brushing occasionally. The Oakland hills glittered with lights, and the bay breeze carried the salt smell of the ocean. When we finally stopped at her car, there was a moment, a heartbeat of possibility, where I thought she might kiss me. Instead, she squeezed my hand. Good night, Emma. That night, I lay awake analyzing every word, every gesture. My phone lit up around midnight. Thank you for tonight. It wasn't professional at all, was it? I smiled at her text. Not even a little bit. The next few sessions were charged with unspoken tension. We maintained the facade of professionalism, but every touch felt like a secret conversation. My shoulder was healing, but I found myself inventing reasons to keep coming back. One evening, as she was working on my shoulder, her fingers stilled. Emma, she said softly, I think we need to talk about what's happening here. Do we? My voice was barely a whisper. I've never crossed this line with a patient before, but I can't stop thinking about you. The confession hung in the air between us, heavy with possibility and danger. I knew what she meant, my career, her professional ethics, the complications that would inevitably follow. But in that moment, watching her vulnerable expression in the dim light of her office, none of it seemed to matter. What I didn't know then was that our careful dance around these feelings was about to become the least of our worries. Sometimes the greatest threats come from the past, and Cass's past was about to catch up with both of us. That night changed everything. After Cass's confession in her office, we decided to take a walk along Lake Merritt. The moon hung low and full, casting silver ripples across the water. We found a quiet spot away from the joggers and dog walkers, and for a while, we just sat in comfortable silence. I've never felt this way about a woman before, I finally said, watching the moonlight play across her face. It should feel stranger than it does. Cass turned to me, her green eyes reflecting the moonlight. Sometimes the heart knows things before the mind catches up. She reached out, tucking a strand of my blonde hair behind my ear. The simple gesture sent shivers down my spine. I'm still not sure who moved first. One moment we were talking, and the next, her lips were on mine. It was soft, tentative at first, then deepening with a hunger that surprised us both. Her hand cupped my face, and I felt myself melting into her touch. When we finally pulled apart, I was trembling. Well, she whispered, that answers that question. The days that followed were a blur of discovery and confusion. I canceled my dating app subscriptions, ignored texts from a persistent male tennis player I'd been casually seeing, and spent hours analyzing my past relationships. Had I always been this way? Had I been suppressing these feelings all along? Cass was patient, understanding. There's no timeline for figuring yourself out, she said one evening as we cuddled on her couch, some forgotten movie playing in the background. No right or wrong way to come out. Coming out. The phrase terrified me. As a professional athlete, my personal life was already under constant scrutiny. The tennis world wasn't exactly known for its progressive attitudes. But when I was with Cass, those fears seemed distant. We created our own little world in her Oakland Hills apartment, cooking dinner together, sharing stories, discovering each other. She taught me about wine, and I taught her about tennis. Each kiss felt more natural than the last. One rainy Sunday morning, as we lay tangled in her sheets, the sun barely filtering through the clouds, she traced patterns on my bare shoulder. I need to tell you something, she said, her voice serious. My heart stuttered. What is it? I'm falling in love with you, Emma Harrison, and it terrifies me. I rolled over to face her, taking in her tousled dark hair, the vulnerability in her eyes. Why does it terrify you? She was quiet for a moment. Because the last time I felt this way about someone, it nearly destroyed me. I kissed her softly, trying to convey everything I couldn't yet say. I'm not her, I whispered against her lips. That afternoon, we made love for the first time. It was tender, passionate, and nothing like I'd experienced before. Every touch felt like coming home to a place I never knew I was missing. Later, as rain drummed against the windows, Cass fell asleep in my arms. I watched her breathe, marveling at how natural this felt, how right. My phone buzzed with a message from my agent about upcoming tournament schedules, but I ignored it. The outside world could wait. What I didn't know then was that our bubble was about to burst. Sometimes the past doesn't stay buried, no matter how much we wish it would. And Cass's past was already threading its way back into our present, like poison seeping through clear water. But in that moment, listening to the rain and Cass's steady breathing, I was happier than I'd ever been. Sometimes the biggest risks bring the greatest rewards, even if they come with a price we're not yet ready to pay. The first time I saw Sarah, I didn't know who she was. She was just a striking redhead lingering outside Cass's clinic after hours, smoking a cigarette with deliberate grace. Something about her posture, the way she leaned against the wall like she owned it, made me uneasy. "Cassie still working late, I see," she called out as I approached the entrance. The nickname rolled off her tongue like honey laced with poison. Before I could respond, the clinic door flew open. Cass stood there, her face drained of color. "Sarah." The name came out like a curse. "What are you doing here? Can't I check on an old friend?" Sarah's smile didn't reach her eyes. "Though it seems you've been busy making new ones." The tension in the air was suffocating. Cass's hand found mine, gripping it tightly. "Emma, this is Sarah Matthews, my ex." "The tennis player?" Sarah's laugh was sharp. "Oh, Cassie, always mixing business with pleasure, aren't we?" "You need to leave." Cass's voice was steady, but I could feel her trembling beside me. "We'll catch up soon," Sarah promised, dropping her cigarette and crushing it under her heel. As she walked away, she called over her shoulder, "By the way, the medical board might be interested in your new treatment methods." That night, in Cass's apartment, the whole story came out. Sarah had been her partner for 3 years, a relationship that started similarly, with Sarah as a patient. But what began as love turned into manipulation and emotional abuse. Sarah had threatened to report Cass for ethical violations when things ended. "She's good at making everything seem like your fault," Cass said, her voice hollow. "At twisting the truth until you can't recognize it anymore." I held her as she cried, rage building in my chest. Why didn't she follow through with the threats? She likes having power over people. The threat was more valuable than actually doing it. Over the next few weeks, Sarah became a shadow in our lives. She'd show up at random, at restaurants where we were dining, at my practice sessions, always with that same poisonous smile. Each appearance carried an unspoken threat. Then the messages started. First to Cass, old photos, reminders of their time together, hints about professional misconduct. Then to me, warnings about Cass's pattern with patients, suggestions that I was just the latest in a long line. "She's lying," Cass assured me one night, after I showed her the latest message. "There's never been anyone else, just her. And now you." I believed her, but the seeds of doubt Sarah planted were taking root in other people's minds. My coach started asking questions about my relationship with my physiotherapist. Whispers circulated at the clinic. The breaking point came when Sarah cornered me after practice. "Has she told you about Boston?" she asked, her green eyes glittering. "About why she really left her last position?" "Whatever you're selling, I'm not buying," I said, but my voice wavered. "Ask her," Sarah smiled. "Ask her about Dr. Roberts and the investigation." That evening, I found Cass sitting in the dark in her apartment. "We need to talk about Boston," I said softly. She looked up, tears streaming down her face. I was wondering when Sarah would bring that up. As she began to speak, I realized that sometimes the ghosts we run from catch up to us in ways we never expect. And sometimes, facing them requires more courage than we think we possess. The truth about Boston was about to change everything, not just for Cass and me, but for Sarah too. Because sometimes the past we think we're running from is actually running towards something much worse. The Oakland Tennis Open loomed closer, and despite Sarah's shadow hanging over us, my game was stronger than ever. Cass's treatments had worked miracles on my shoulder, but it was more than that. For the first time in my career, I was playing for something beyond rankings and titles. "Your serve is back to full power," Mike commented during practice. "Whatever Dr. Mitchell's doing, it's working." If only he knew how right he was. Cass had become my anchor, my safe harbor. After each practice, she'd work out the knots in my muscles, her touch both professional and intimate. We'd developed a rhythm, a dance of healing and love that translated into my performance on the court. The night before my first tournament match, we lay in bed at my apartment, the city lights twinkling through the windows. Cass traced the muscles of my serving arm, checking for any tension. "You're ready," she whispered, her lips brushing my shoulder. "You're going to be amazing tomorrow." What happened next was inevitable, beautiful, and completely ours. In the darkness, we found each other with a passion that left us breathless, our bodies moving together like we'd been lovers in 100 previous lives. The next morning, I woke up feeling invincible. Cass was already up, making coffee in my kitchen, wearing one of my old tennis shirts. The sight made my heart swell. "Ready for your big day, champion?" She smiled, handing me a mug. I won my first match in straight sets, playing with a freedom I'd never felt before. As I walked off the court, I caught sight of Cass in the stands, trying to be inconspicuous but beaming with pride. The sports media noticed my improved performance. "Harrison shows remarkable comeback," one headline read. "Mystery physio credited with tennis star's return to form," said another. The attention made Cass nervous, but we were careful. Professional in public, saving our private moments for behind closed doors. But secrets have a way of unraveling. After winning my quarter-final match, I was riding high on adrenaline and euphoria. Cass met me in the training room for a quick post-match treatment. "You were incredible out there," she said, working on my shoulder. "It's all thanks to you," I replied, pulling her down for a kiss. We didn't hear the door open. The camera click, however, was unmistakable. We jumped apart to find a wide-eyed junior sports reporter standing there, phone in hand. I'm sorry," he stammered, backing away. I was looking for post-match comments. "Wait," I called, but he was already gone. Panic set in immediately. Cass began pacing the room. "This could ruin everything. Your career, my practice." I grabbed her hands, forcing her to stop. "Hey, look at me. We'll handle this together." But the reality was more complicated. By evening, social media was buzzing with speculation. My agent called in a panic, demanding an explanation. The tournament organizers whispered about professional conduct and image concerns. That night, in my apartment, Cass and I lay awake, neither speaking. The weight of our public exposure pressed down on us like a physical thing. "Maybe we should take a break," Cass finally whispered. "Just until the tournament's over." "No," I said firmly. "I'm done hiding." She turned to face me, her green eyes bright with tears. "Emma, your career is important," I finished. "But not as important as this, as us." We made love again that night, slower this time, more deliberate, like we were memorizing each other. Something had shifted, we both felt it. Our private paradise had been breached, and the real world was rushing in. The next morning, my semi-final match loomed ahead, but a bigger battle was brewing. Sarah had seen the social media buzz, and her response was swift and brutal. My phone buzzed with a message from an unknown number. Time to show everyone who Cassandra Mitchell really is. The game was about to change, and we were playing for keeps now. Sarah's threat materialized faster than we expected. The morning of my semi-final match, an anonymous email reached the tournament board, the medical licensing board, and several sports journalists. It detailed allegations of Cass's pattern of inappropriate relationships with patients, starting with Sarah and supposedly continuing through her time in Boston. My agent called in a panic. "Emma, this is serious. There's talk of investigating your recent wins for potential unfair advantages." The implications were clear. They could strip me of my tournament victories, possibly even suspend me from future competitions. Everything I'd worked for was hanging by a thread. Cass withdrew into herself, the guilt eating her alive. "This is exactly what I was afraid of," she said, sitting in her darkened apartment that evening. "Sarah's taking everything I love again." "Tell me about Boston," I pressed gently. "The real story, all of it." She took a deep breath. "Dr. Roberts was my mentor there. Sarah found out he'd been falsifying research data and reported him, but she twisted it to implicate me too. I left before the investigation concluded because I couldn't handle the stress. Running made me look guilty." "But you weren't involved?" "No. I have proof, emails, documents. I was too scared to fight back then." The next day, the tournament board requested an emergency meeting. I sat there watching these men in suits discuss my personal life like it was their property to judge. "Miss Harrison, given the serious nature of these allegations, one began. I'll withdraw from the tournament, I interrupted. The room fell silent. Cass, who had been waiting outside, burst in. Emma, no! Ms. Mitchell, this is a private meeting, a board member started. Let her speak, I demanded. But before Cass could say anything, Sarah appeared in the doorway. I think I should be part of this conversation too. The next hour was chaos. Sarah spun her web of half-truths and manipulations, but something was different this time. Cass wasn't the same person she'd broken years ago. Enough, Cass said quietly, pulling out her phone. I have recordings, Sarah, of your threats, your admissions about Dr. Roberts, everything. Sarah's composed facade cracked. You're bluffing. Try me. The tension in the room could have been cut with a knife. Sarah's face went through a series of emotions: anger, fear, calculation. Finally, she turned and walked out without another word. But the damage was done. The board suggested a temporary separation between Cass and me, at least until things cooled down, for the sake of appearances. That night in my empty apartment, I felt hollow. My phone buzzed with a message from Cass. I love you too much to let me be the reason your dreams die. I stared at those words until they blurred through my tears. She was pulling away, trying to protect me. But sometimes protection feels worse than the threat itself. The next few days were a blur. I withdrew from the tournament, citing my shoulder injury as the official reason. Cass stopped taking my calls. The media circus grew, with headlines speculating about everything from professional misconduct to romantic scandal. I sat in my apartment, surrounded by the debris of my career, wondering if love was worth losing everything for. The answer came to me as I watched the sunset over Oakland. Some things are worth fighting for, even if you have to fight alone. What I didn't know then was that sometimes, when you're ready to fight alone, that's exactly when you discover you don't have to. I'd never been one for grand gestures, but desperate times called for desperate measures. After a week of Cass's silence and watching our story be twisted by the media, I'd had enough. I called a press conference. The hotel conference room was packed with sports journalists, their cameras clicking like hungry insects. My agent stood in the corner, shaking his head. He'd begged me not to do this. I'm here to set the record straight, I began, my voice steadier than I felt. Yes, I'm in a relationship with Dr. Cassandra Mitchell. Yes, it began while she was my physiotherapist. And no, I'm not ashamed of it. The room erupted with questions. I held up my hand. But this isn't just about us. This is about manipulation, about how someone's past trauma can be weaponized against them. That's when I saw her, Cass, slipping in at the back of the room, her eyes wide. I hadn't told her about the press conference. Our gazes locked, and I drew strength from her presence. Dr. Mitchell is being targeted by a former patient who has a history of manipulative behavior. I have evidence. I nodded to my lawyer, who began distributing packets to the journalists. The packets contained everything: Sarah's threatening messages, the recordings Cass had mentioned, and statements from other professionals in Boston corroborating Cass's version of events about Dr. Roberts. I'm willing to risk my career to stand up for the truth, I continued. Because sometimes silence protects the wrong people. After the press conference, Cass found me in the hotel lobby. You shouldn't have done that, she whispered, but her eyes were shining. Someone wise once told me there's no timeline for figuring yourself out. I smiled. Well, I'm figured out now. I choose you. We were interrupted by my phone ringing, Sarah's number. Cass nodded, and I put it on speaker. Quite a show you put on. Sarah's voice was tight with anger. But you missed something. I have proof of Cassie's involvement in the Boston scandal. No, you don't, Cass replied calmly, because there isn't any, and we both know why. There was a long pause. You're not the same person anymore, are you? Sarah finally said. Neither are you, Cass responded. You're still trying to control a narrative that ended years ago. Let it go, Sarah. The line went dead. Later that evening, Sarah sent one final message. I'm sorry. It wasn't much, but it was something. The aftermath of the press conference was intense. Some sponsors dropped me, others surprisingly stood by me. The medical board reviewed the evidence and cleared Cass of any wrongdoing. The tennis world buzzed with opinions, but for the first time, I didn't care. That night, Cass and I walked along Lake Merritt, back to where we'd shared our first kiss. You risked everything, she said softly. No, I corrected her. I chose everything. There's a difference. She stopped walking and pulled me close. "I love you, Emma Harrison." "I love you too," I replied, kissing her under the same moon that had witnessed our beginning. As we walked home hand in hand, I realized that sometimes the bravest thing isn't fighting your battles alone, it's letting someone fight beside you. And sometimes, when you stand up for love, love stands up for you right back. The storm wasn't over yet, but we'd weathered the worst of it together. Sometimes that's all you need to know you're on the right path. 6 months after the press conference, I stood on center court at the Oakland Tennis Open, the same tournament where everything had begun. My shoulder felt strong, my spirit stronger. Cass sat in my player's box, no longer hiding, wearing my spare team jacket with Harrison emblazoned across the back. The journey back hadn't been easy. Some tournaments had been reluctant to accept my entries, citing controversy concerns, but my game spoke louder than the whispers. Match by match, win by win, I'd earned my way back. "Championship point," the umpire announced. I bounced the ball 3 times, my pre-serve ritual unchanged since I was 12. The crowd was silent, the afternoon sun casting long shadows across the court. I looked up at Cass, who gave me that small nod that always steadied my nerves. The serve was perfect, 121 miles per hour down the tee ace. Game, set, match, championship. As I lifted the trophy, I spotted Sarah in the crowd. She'd kept her distance these months, but her presence today felt different, like closure. She caught my eye and offered a small smile before disappearing into the crowd. The press conference afterward was nothing like the emotional one 6 months ago. "How does it feel to win your first tournament since coming out?" a reporter asked. "It feels like being exactly who I'm supposed to be," I answered, watching Cass try to hide her proud smile in the back of the room. Later that night, at the celebration dinner, Cass pulled me aside onto the restaurant's balcony. The Bay Bridge twinkled in the distance, and the Oakland hills were alive with lights. "I have something for you," she said, pulling out a small box. Inside was a key. "Move in with me?" she asked. "I know my place is smaller, but—" I silenced her with a kiss. "Yes, but I have something for you too." I'd been carrying the ring for weeks, waiting for the right moment. This wasn't how I'd planned it, still in my tennis dress, hair messy from the match, but it felt perfect. "Marry me?" Her eyes widened, then filled with tears. "Are you sure? Your career?" "Has never been better," I finished. "Because I'm finally playing as my whole self. And that's because of you." She said yes. The news broke the next morning. Tennis star Emma Harrison engaged to former physiotherapist. This time we controlled the narrative. This time, we celebrated openly. My phone buzzed with a text from Sarah. "Congratulations, you both deserve happiness." Healing comes in many forms. Sometimes it's physical therapy for a shoulder injury. Sometimes it's finding the courage to love openly. And sometimes it's letting go of past hurts and finding forgiveness, both for others and yourself. That evening, Cass and I walked along Lake Merritt, our special place. The setting sun painted the sky in brilliant oranges and pinks, a perfect Oakland evening. "You know," Cass said, "when you first walked into my clinic with that shoulder injury, I never imagined we'd end up here." I squeezed her hand. I did. Well, maybe not consciously, but something in me knew, from that very first touch. We stopped to watch a pair of ducks glide across the water, their wake creating ripples that spread outward, touching everything in their path. Like love, I thought. Like courage. Like truth. "Ready to go home?" Cass asked. Home. Not just a place, but a person, a feeling, a truth. With you? Always. And as we walked toward our future together, I realized that sometimes the greatest victories aren't won on a tennis court. They're won in the quiet moments, in the brave choices, in the decision to love openly and honestly, no matter what the world might say. Game, set, match, love.